This is Brad Jensen, and you're listening to the Next Level Podcast. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Next Level Health and Fitness Podcast. Today, I'm pretty stoked. Ben Carpenter is joining us on the show. He is a fitness coach, self-described as a research nerd. This is off the internet. This is not me saying all this. Who has dedicated his career to providing clear, evidence-based guidance on fat loss. Originally from the UK, and you will never know that when you hear him talk. Now resides in California with his wife. Ben has had. You have a big presence on social media, and I think you share a lot of good information. And I've been following you for years, so I'm pretty thrilled. And you know what? I only got Ben on the show by happen chance because he was searching his DMs for something else. So welcome to the show, man.
Thank you so much for having me on. That sounds like I'm here by accident. It was I'm one of those people that doesn't check my DMs very often. And someone emailed me saying, "Oh, I sent you a podcast invite." And I was like, "Oh shit, I didn't even see that." So I went to my inbox and searched podcast. And that's when I saw your message. And I'm like, this is what happens when you don't check your messages. So pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
You got a little bit you're following than me, and I can relate. I wish I was more active in my DMs. It's hard when you're managing a life and business and all the things. And so I'm with you. So, well, yeah, let's kind of take, for listeners who are not familiar with you. You're an author, you're a coach. I believe you in-person trained in the very beginning of your career. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I've been a personal trainer since 2006. It's all I've ever done. I'm 37 now. I started working in a gym, I think when I was 17, and then qualified as a personal trainer shortly after that. So all I have done is worked in the fitness industry my whole life. I don't know who started describing me as a research nerd or if it was me, but I've noticed that has become my bio that's been shared around. The reason I describe myself as research nerd is because I got into personal training and then I kind of researched off the back of that. Every time a client came to me and said, "Hey, I saw this article on red meat or artificial sweeteners or whether training squats before biceps means that your biceps grow faster," like all of these kind of questions that came from clients. And because they came from clients, I then went off to research. So I wasn't one of those people that was like, I want to go to uni, I want to get a degree, I want to get a master's or PhD. That's not the route I went down. For me, it was all kind of retrospective research after I qualified as a personal trainer. So I've built a little bit of a social media following by putting out research-based videos, but that's purely reflective of what people ask me. When people message me and say, "Hey, is this true or not?" I make a video on it. That's supply and demand.
Yeah, it's funny when I'm on the Explore feed and trying to find any content to, maybe debunk or talk about or get a different perspective. I'll if it's something really controversial, I'll see in the comments, they just tag you. They don't even say anything. They just tag you.
Yeah, and the funny thing about this, right, is I realized a few months ago, you know what social media is like. Anyone who follows you probably already knows this, but there's a lot of misinformation on social media. There's a lot of bullshit on social media. And I realized that every single morning I go to social media and I open my notifications. So I go to tags on TikTok, I get tags on Instagram, Facebook, etc. And I realized that I honestly think about 75% of the things that I'm tagged in are always nonsense. So if someone's like, "Hey, is this true?" And it's someone saying that you cannot lose fat unless you're on a keto diet or something like that, and I make a video response to it, I realized after a while that a lot of the videos I was putting out made it sound like I was trying to be negative. And every so often someone will comment and say, "All you do is try and shit on other people." And I'm like, I promise you that is not what I'm trying to do. I don't go out of my way thinking I need to find a video to shit on. I just respond to the questions that people have. And I view it a little bit like if a client used to come to me in the gym and say, "Hey, I saw this article, I saw this video, or I saw, V-Shred trying to sell me something online. Is it correct?" And then I'd respond to it. And if my videos ever look like I'm responding to negative things, that is literally because that is what I'm tagged in. And I wish I was tagged in more positive videos, but unfortunately, that's not what goes viral on social media.
I think you do a great job. I don't think I mean, you're actually pretty respectful, and I think you really paint nuance and you paint the other side of it. You're nicer than me sometimes, that's for sure. So, I don't feel like you because if people don't the problem is when these people say things with such conviction, and I've talked about this multiple times on here with other guests, that the average consumer says, "Wow, that guy must know what he's talking about because he said it like
Yeah.
it was a fact."
Yeah.
And so it takes creators like yourself and others um, to shine a different light on the other side of what they're saying, and sometimes it's just completely false what they're saying, and other times there's a lot of nuance that they leave out.
I've got like I kind of have a rule with my sarcasm and my snark is if someone is just genuinely a little bit incorrect. Let's say, for example, someone says you have to do your cardio fasted or you won't burn body fat. If it's like a genuine mistake, I normally say, here's the science, here is why people think that, here's what the science really shows, that type of thing. If it's someone that I think is being dangerous or intentionally misleading, then that's when I tend to get more sarcastic. So if I see someone who is genuinely putting out information that I think is intentionally wrong, so they can sell you something or they're trying to scam you or the information they put out I think is harmful, that's when I tend to be a little bit more brutal. But normally if someone is just like a little bit incorrect or a genuine mistake, I will always try and be polite because all of us have made mistakes. I've made countless mistakes in my career, and if I didn't give good grace to people, then it means that I wouldn't have given good grace to myself 10 years ago. Lots of the things that I kind of debunk now are mistakes that I have made in the past. It's more that I'm trying to save people from the same pitfalls that I fell into when I was younger.
Yeah, I mean, I think you do a phenomenal job at that. What was your transition? When did you transition between I'm gonna come back to this because I actually have a couple points I wanna talk to you about. When did you transition from in-person to online coaching or, like, just the online world? Or did you even
Yeah.
transition
So I actually I've never done online coaching
Yeah, that's actually
ever.
why when I said it, I'm like, I don't even think he does online coaching because he
S
never even talks about
this
it.
this this is one of those things, like, I will as you can probably imagine, I get a lot of messages from people saying, "Hey, can I do online coaching? I never see you talk about it. How much do you charge?" All of that stuff. And for me, it didn't really it's just not something. I have nothing against online coaching. Lots of my friends are great online coaches. For me, I really struggled with it because I am a very, very empathetic person and I love giving people my time for free. I love giving people my time for free. So, like, if someone stopped me in the gym and said, I really need help on this exercise, I will happily spend 20, 30 minutes helping them for free. No sales pitch, no nothing, just because it's a passion and I enjoy it. And one of the things I really struggled with when I tried online training, you know, close to a couple of decades ago, or at least probably 15 years ago, is I really struggled to do things via email. I love talking to people face to face. I love hearing,
Jesus.
when some like a client comes to you and says, "I'm not losing body fat." Let's just pick an easy example. I'm not losing body fat. And when you're face to face, within 5 minutes, you can often have a really good conversation about, like, tell me what you're struggling with, tell me how I can help, all of those conversations. And I didn't feel good doing it via email. I always felt like I was delivering a worse service. And I also you can't do online coaching very cheap without not giving people much of your time. And I wanted to give people more of my time. And I realized it just wasn't scalable. So I just realized that that's not for me. And that's part of the reason I got in the habit of just making free content and putting it out there and then writing a book and putting it out there because I can just make one book that's as good as I can make it, and then people can buy it. And I don't have to charge people for their time. I don't have to worry about whether I'm giving people enough face to face time. Um, but my online transition was 2009, Facebook and YouTube, and then I think Instagram a few years later. Obviously TikTok a few years later. But it just started because on YouTube I used to have clients that would say, like, a message and say, "Hey, I know you gave me this exercise, but I can't remember how to do it." And all I started doing was just filming exercises. So let's say, for example, a safety bar squat or a back squat with bands or a front squat with chains or whatever it was. and I would just have a video, and it would just be me performing it. I did no talking, I did nothing. It was just so people could look at it. So my plan was to kind of create this exercise library, and then I started trying to coach people a little bit more. So I would say, here's the exercise we're doing today. Here is the technique that I'm using. Here's why I'm using that technique. And again, it was just free videos. So if someone wanted to learn how to perform a bent over row or a squat or a lunge or whatever, I could just say, here's the link, and give people free information. And then over time, I started getting more comments about like nutrition questions and other training questions rather than exercises. And I just kind of went in this like upward spiral. I made like one video about flexible dieting, one video about sugar, one video about high intensity interval training versus low intensity steady state. And then it just kind of carried on and carried on. And I love it. I love social media. I love um, the feeling that I'm helping people for free without having to charge them anything. I love how many people I've met on social media, my wife, some of my best friends on social media. So yeah, I really love it. I know there's a lot of shit on social media, but it has been really, really good to me.
Yeah, there's gotta be it's interesting because you say all that. I mean, I've been following you for, I don't know, years probably. And I remember I just every piece of content, I didn't feel like I was getting sold something. So I was like, and not that I mean, I still follow people that I'm like, okay, here comes the sales pitch. And listen, I
Mhm.
run a business, I'll do these lead magnets. But there is something very, very refreshing about someone who's just like putting out content to genuinely help. And so many of us are using it as a leverage point, and even if that's, books or whatever, but to not have to sell any coaching while you're making these reels, I think probably actually lands significantly better with I mean, that's been my biggest problem is I don't wanna be like, "Oh, but sign up for my coaching if you
Yeah,
wanna get fat to fit right now," um, and I think that's why people have been really drawn to you, and I actually think you're pretty empathetic in debunking these people. You could be way more rude. You never say anything about the actual
yeah.
individual, like,
I'm
there's
glad you
other
picked up on that. I never
never.
insult the way someone looks. I never, call people stupid or anything like that. I tend to be like, this information, I can say this information is garbage, but I don't insult the person unless that person has been a real dickhead. Like if someone made a video about you and they were really rude to you and I made a video response, I don't mind being rude back, but I don't tend to initiate that rudeness. You actually reminded me, a few years ago, someone came up to me at a fitness conference, and it was one of those fitness conferences that in the evening people have a few drinks, and a guy came up to me and he was, I think, a little bit drunk. I was not, um, and he was like, "I love your content. I followed you for years. I don't understand why you don't sell more." He was like, "You could be earning way more money. You could be doing this. You could be doing this. You could be doing this." And don't get me wrong, it's really nice hearing someone talking to me in a very like he was trying to compliment me and he was talking about, oh, you could be making so much money, you could be like a millionaire if you did this, you did this, I never see you selling anything, blah blah blah. And the thing that he never asked me at any point is if I was happy doing what I was doing. And one a really good friend of mine who's on social media called Dr. Mike the Second, he's one of the best people I've ever met. He actually said to me recently, and it really struck a chord. He said some people get into industries to make money, and some people get into industries because they love it, and money is a secondary concern. And he said the reason that so much of what you put out is really good quality is because you are definitely the second kind of person. So to me, I earn enough to live for sure. I'm comfortable doing what I'm doing. I'm certainly not a millionaire or anything, but I feel very happy putting out free social media content, knowing that some people buy my book, that supports me, that's enough. And I can sleep well at night feeling like I don't have to sell people things or do anything that kind of jeopardizes my morals, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, you're a really humble guy too. I mean, just even before we started, you were just like, "Hey, like this is your show. Let's just you take it, like whatever." And I think that speaks volumes about you. And man, people pick up on that. I think in this day and age, that it's just it's. I've been around. I'm sure you've been around more than me. A lot of quote unquote influencers who you kind of see two different sides of how they are in real life and how they are on
Massive
social media.
assholes.
Yeah, and it's like, wow, that whole thing was a front, and especially as I was kinda coming up in the industry, I would
Yeah.
put these people who had, three, four, five, 600,000 followers on these pedestals. And I really got a hard lesson 5 years ago was like, oh, not only A, are we all just people, but B, I started seeing that some of them just aren't who they and who they present to be on social media, at least not the side
Yeah.
I saw of them. And I think that's why people are drawn to you. I mean, I'm sure you've seen that as well, right?
I'm not gonna say the name. It'd be really, like, unfair of me to say the name, but I remember years and years ago, I'm gonna be super vague on purpose. I met someone who was a social media influencer. I'm not even gonna say, like, guy or girl or age or what they did or anything. And when I met them, they were one of the loveliest people I'd met. They stopped me at a fitness conference, and they were genuinely lovely, really, really lovely. And their social media took off. I didn't know who they were when I met them, but over the course of the next 2 or 3 years, they became really, really popular and became really, really well known. And I saw them again at a fitness conference, um, and they were an absolute arsehole. You I If you had met them for the first time, you would have assumed they were some kind of celebrity in terms of how they acted, like not giving people their time, acting like they were too important to make conversation with people, not even like making eye contact when they met people. Just there was a really bad vibe about them. And even when I tried talking to them, it's like they didn't care to talk to me at all anymore, even though they were so nice before. And I remember thinking, everyone has bad days. I'm not saying that it couldn't have been it could have been that. But I remember thinking it would be a real shame if the person who I thought was so lovely when I first met them became an arsehole because they became popular on social media. It's like I view it as pseudo fame. There are a lot of influencers and people on social media that get big followings, and I think it goes to their head a little bit, and they act like they're kind of better humans, and I hate that. And I hate the idea that anyone who knew me years ago, before social media was like a thing for me and not as big as it is now. I hate the idea that if they met me in real life again, they would say, God, he's really changed. I hate that he didn't care to talk to people, or he doesn't actually try and help people. It's all a front for social media. I hate that. And I couldn't sleep well at night. I've got a really thick guilt streak that runs through me where if I even slightly deviate from what I view as ethically correct, it will keep me up. I'm so anxious about things all the time that I would just prefer to be like, here's how I want to do things. If it doesn't fall within my what I'm comfortably with ethically, then it's a no. I can't remember who it was. Someone said to me, if it's not a fuck yes, it's a fuck no. And a lot of things for me are a fuck no because I just don't like it. So
Yeah, it's there was I'll leave his name out too. It was somebody who's a bigger name on social media, a big podcaster. When I met him, I was like,
there are a lot of people who seem really friendly until you meet them, until you
yeah,
talk to them, and you're like, "Oh, you
I
are
was
not
so
the same."
disappointed. I walked away, and I remember a buddy I was with is like, dude, here's the problem. You think he's famous. Kind of the same thing he said, like pseudo famous. He said, if my parents don't know who he is, he's not probably famous. Like he's famous in our world because we're inundated in this fitness bubble. But on the grand scheme of things, and that's the problem, is they let that pseudo fame, like you said, kind of start dictating. And I think that it's a general problem with people on social media is getting their validation. From like shares, attention, and I mean, I definitely noticed which one of my posts do well or not, but I've done a lot of intentional work because I went on the roller coaster of letting that actually provide some kind of, eh, not even just fulfillment, but like I was like, either on or I'm like, man, my posts are bombing, and I was super bummed about it. And then I would almost mask in the name of, well, I'm not getting my message out to enough people. But really, when I got honest with myself and called out by a good friend, it was because I was getting some worth from it. Some validation was really feeding my ego.
There was actually there's a video that I'm literally about to post, like, in the next couple of days, from a guy. I might pronounce his surname incorrectly. This isn't intentional, but a guy called Bill Mader, I think his name is. He's got a couple of million followers. Uh, he's posted lots of videos where he's shirtless. He's incredibly like muscular and lean, and he's doing exercises that sometimes look quite funky, but like very impressive. And he made a video about the same thing where he said he realized that he was chasing the kind of validation of trying to get likes and shares and engagement and followers, etc. And sometimes it can take you away from a little bit. take you away from the path that you originally started on. And to people who aren't in social media, I think a good parallel for this is, you know how people become so obsessed with weight loss that they focus on the scales and everything else goes to shit. They're like, if the number on the scales is going down, it's good. Sometimes they will resort to unhealthy habits to try and facilitate that. And they start number chasing. They try and beat the scale rather than following healthy habits and let whatever happens on the scale come second. And I think that's the trap that some people fall into on social media, where um, they get away from content they enjoy posting because they realize that different kinds of posts are good for engagement and followers and likes. And I think it slowly, with social media, drifts people to posting more and more extreme content because the extreme content often grabs people's attention. And I think that's the uh, almost like the Liver King pitfall. People realize that if they post really extreme eye-catching stuff, they get more engagement. And then over time, they just go more, they kind of lean into it more and more so. One of the things you said, though, at the risk of like, this is going to sound weirdly deep for a podcast where I've just mentioned the Liver King. It's like a massive tangent. But I remember, I remember years ago, I'm not even sure if I've ever told anyone this. I was at my granddad's funeral. Fucking hell, this is such a weird tangent, but this is how important it is to me. I was at my granddad's funeral, and I can't remember how old I was. I was a teenager, I think. And I remember all these people turned up that I'd never met. He was in the military, and there were all of these other people from the military who turned up, and it kind of put into perspective for me the number of lives he touched while he was alive. And I remember listening to people talking about him and thinking, I didn't even know any of this stuff. I had no idea that he was so well regarded and he had achieved so much and so many people looked up to him. And I remember thinking, when I die, what will people say about me? And part of it for me is I could not give a shit about, he drove a Lamborghini while he was alive, or he was a super successful business person, or any of that. That's not stuff you kind of take to the grave. I thought one day when I die, I want people talking about me with the same flattery, the same compliments and kindness that people were talking about my grandfather about. And that to me was like, I remember that very vividly, and I've kind of stuck with that ever since.
Mm. You know, it's so true, and I think that those are the only moments where we go to a funeral and we hear it, and it's like, people didn't talk about his Lamborghini, they talked about the person he was, and,
Yeah.
yeah, I think social media can be, um and I've gone through phases of loving it and hating it and getting way too much validation out of it, and, like, the more work I do spiritually and personally on myself, the more I can appreciate what social media gives me a platform just to speak to other people and get a message out. But I definitely have to check myself more than I would like to admit on not posting a piece of content. And just because I know it'll be controversial and it will get likes, views, and attention. That's just being honest.
No, I think that's fair. I think it's easy to fall into that trap. It's kind of like the equivalent of chasing the dopamine high, if you will, but with social media, you see the numbers going up and you're like, "Oh, this is good. I'm gonna post more and more of that stuff." But yeah, it can be really easy to fall into the trap of chasing that at the expense of the quality of the posts you put out, I think. I actually had this conversation a few days ago with a friend of mine, Liam Layton, and I said I kind of got into social media. The posts that I like making aren't viral posts. I like having really nerdy conversations where like people will tag me in topics like, um, is it true that when you do more cardio, you don't burn more fat? And I love being like, oh my God, I want to talk about the science of this. I want to talk about the constrained model of energy expenditure. I want to talk about compensatory adaptive mechanisms that make people lose less weight than they think when they start doing exercise. I love talking about the research, but to a lot of people, they don't actually give a shit about that stuff. So I try and find a way where it scratches the itch that I have to talk about topics that I like, but in a way that people still find them useful without being like too nerdy. And if I can do both and I can be happy with the type of content I post and people can resonate with it, then that's win-win to me.
Man, I'm trying to find one. There was one you did was so good. I love your analogies, and you got, like, marshmallows or gosh, I'm trying to remember. I'm always like, "Damn, why didn't I think of that?" That was so good. Um, and helping people understand the difference of gosh, I saved the post. I was just scrolling trying to find it, but of, like, something having a similar effect, like, people like I don't remember what the post is about, but I know you gave an example of, testosterone and sitting in a sports car can actually
Oh,
shift.
I've given this analogy a few times. So one of the examples is normally when people say something along the lines of, um, if you eat this food, it raises GLP-1 like
Yes,
Ozempic.
yes.
And my
Nature's
analogy,
Ozempic.
yeah, nature's Ozempic became a huge social media hype train of people trying to capitalize on the Ozempic hype. Um, and one of the explanations I gave is just because something can change your hormone in your body doesn't necessarily mean it will have the same effect as a pharmaceutical that changes that hormone. So if someone takes Ozempic as a GLP-1 receptor agonist, you can also raise GLP-1 naturally in the body by eating certain foods, fibers, proteins, etc. But just because they you can influence the same hormone doesn't necessarily mean that you have the same outcome. And an example of that is, let's say, testosterone levels. You can inject testosterone, obviously. Everyone knows anabolic steroids exist and they can work very, very well. You can also raise testosterone doing some more niche things. For example, driving a fancy sports car has been shown to raise testosterone in one very small scale experiment, as is seeing your favorite sports team win. Guys who see their favorite sports team win will have a small increase in testosterone afterwards. Um, and, little things like that. But if I said, well, watching your favorite sports team win means that you're going to build muscle, you would laugh because you know that's not true. But if I say, yeah, but it raises testosterone like anabolic steroids, you still know it's not true. But that's the angle people were using to try and sell the Nature's Ozempic. And Nature's Ozempic was often things like protein cookie dough or expensive olive oil or berberine or various other supplements. It was a lot of the time it was used as a sales pitch for something else rather than saying, hey, here are some foods that are good for appetite regulation. It was always, if you want Nature's Ozempic, here's a supplement or buy this or buy this. And that bugs me.
Yeah, I just did a post. There was a guy that was sent to me, by a friend, who was saying, "Is there there's a food that burns fat better than Ozempic, and it's blueberries." And he goes on this, and then at the end of the reel, he just, like, slides in the fact of buying CBD oil and to use his discount code. I was like, "Wow, that was really, clever
How
there."
how did you go from blueberries to CBD oil?
Because you know what else will help you? Sleep. And you know what people struggle most to sleep? And then he goes into CBD oil. It's linked in my bio, and,
That's one of those things where I think there's a certain amount of like scientific literacy that I think is very important to help people stop falling for scams and sales pitches like that. And it's one of those things where you can make something sound sexy by association. So, like, sleep is great for health, is good for fat loss, it's good for appetite regulation, it can help with muscle growth, it can help with sports performance. Good quality sleep is so important for so many things, but you can't then use anything you want that ties to sleep and pretend it does the same thing. That's
yes.
like, for example, some people say eating turkey is good for sleep because it has high amounts of tryptophan, an amino acid that's good for sleep. But if I said eating turkey before bed is going to make you lose fat faster, you'd be like, that sounds like bullshit. It's because it is, but that's the leap from like tryptophan to sleep to improved body composition. It's like nonsense bridge jumping. You just two things that sound similar enough that you can make the connection and hope no one will realize that there's not actually a real connection there.
And again, and that's why creators like you are so good. I mean, and you break it down in a very digestible format with a lot of science. And I think that's what's I'm just not as smart as you, so I don't try to be, but and I think that's some other people's creators' problems is they try to be somebody they're not. And you do a really good job at that. And that's your
Thank
I
you.
know you said we only have to talk about your books, but your first book or not your first book, the last book was 2023, right? And it was Everything Fat Loss, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And then you came out this one and it was all about habits, right?
Yeah.
I guess explain like what made you decide to build on that book? Because I know the central theme of the book is about building
Mhm.
habits for long-term fat loss. Because as we know, and that's one problem with people taking these GLP-1s, they aren't changing their habits. They just happen to eat significantly less, so they lose weight, but then they get off the drug. And there's, I believe, a lot of the rebound effect is yes, your appetite gets higher, but also they haven't. A lot of those people, if they haven't changed their habits, well, oh, they're just back to square one, right? And of course, the weight's going to come back on.
So I would say the central motivation for me um, to write a second book was realizing that my first book was not um, it was not the book that I expected to do as well as it did. So this is going to sound odd, right? The reviews of it are great. I think on Amazon it's very close to like a perfect 5. It's like 4.9 or something after hundreds of reviews. But and this is very this is like a very key thing. When my book was translated into German and then it was sold on Amazon, when it first launched on Amazon, I went and looked at the reviews, and the reviews weren't very good. And it only had a few reviews. It was like the first 3 or 4 reviews, and I was like, "Why has it only got like 3 and 4-star reviews instead of as many 5s as it had?" And I realized one of the issues was, my first book was sold to my existing audience. I wrote it thinking, "I'm gonna make this really fucking nerdy book that my audience who likes science will love this book." It's like it's gonna be niche, it's gonna be nerdy, it's gonna be for that, like, small subset of people that love detail. So you can go to a if you've got a question like, I want to know about meal frequency, or I want to know about sugar or anything like that. You can go straight to that chapter and you almost get a research review where it's like the first meal frequency study was in 1973 and then it was built on by this and built on blah blah blah. Here's what the research does. And it was supposed to be like my original name for the book was called the Fat Loss Bible, and it was supposed to be like a Bible of topics. But I know when you say Bible, it has like a religious connotation, and I didn't like that. Um, and part of the reason it had bad reviews in Germany is because people who bought it had never heard of me. And one of the first reviews, I had to translate it into English. It's like a little bit broken because there's one of those AI translator things. Um, but someone said it's too complicated for me. There's a lot of information in here, and I just find it a little bit too difficult to read. There's too much in there before I get to the things that I want to learn, and that's a really important lesson for me because rewind to like the first few years when I was on social media, I used to do videos like, if you want to know whether high intensity interval training is better than low intensity steady state for fat loss, here is a video. And I talked for like 11 minutes, I think, in one take, where I had 15 research studies or whatever in the references. And it was literally just me sitting in front of the camera and say, so the first research study found that high intensity interval training was better for fat loss and low intensity steady state, but they standardized for calorie burn. And in the real world, that's not how it works. Here's another research study. And it was too nerdy. People don't want to hear 10 minutes of information to get one take home message. So I kind of realized that even though my book was supposed to be for a subset of people who really wanted that nerdy information, it had accidentally become more successful than I expected it to become. It was translated at the moment into 3 languages, which I never imagined would happen. And it's just not supposed to be that book. It was supposed to be for people who are like, I want nerdy stuff. I even said it, I think, in the blurb, like, this is not a dieting book. It's supposed to be like a resource, people who really want the education. And ultimately, if I can't help people faster, then as you know, on social media, if you can't grab people's attention, then it's useless. You could make the best video about a topic like Ozempic, for example. You could make a 15-minute video with all the research. It could be the most detailed video on Ozempic that exists on the internet. And some people, most people, are going to click on it and say, that's too long. I don't want to watch it. And you need to make a 60-second video. So my idea for the second book was primarily, if I have one shot to change as many people's lives as possible with one book, what is the format I would write it in? And that's how I did it. So the the basic tenet of it, the pillar, if you will, is the majority of people who go on weight loss diets aren't still following a weight loss diet within 6 to 9 months. The habits they started on day one, they are not doing 6 months, 9 months later. Now, and anyone who's watching this or listening to this knows that there are some habits that are good for your health for the rest of your life. If I said, I'm going to start exercising today, Brad, I'm going to start exercising today. I'm going to do it for 6 months and then I'm going to stop. You would say, no, 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 please no. I want you to exercise forever because if you're exercising when you're 50, 60, 70 years old, that is still good for your health. You aren't supposed to do it for 6 weeks or 6 months and then stop. There are certain habits that if people were consistent with for the rest of their life, they would significantly improve their health. So my goal is not just to help people lose body fat, but it's to try and advise people to do it in a way where they can improve their health in a format that is actually sustainable. So 5 years from now, 10 years from now, they're not still hopping from one diet to another diet to another diet.
What do you think about people struggle so bad to really, I mean, I have my thoughts, but, change their lifestyle and really change their habits?
What are your thoughts?
I think the problem is people have so many bad habits, as habit is just a thing repeatedly done. Like, it's funny when people are like, that are like, "Oh, no," like, and listen, I'm pretty much whatever works for you, but like a morning routine. They're like, "I don't have a morning routine." I'm
Hmm.
like, "You probably do. It's just probably not a beneficial morning routine." Like, roll out of bed, chug a bunch of coffee, you
Yeah.
know, eat something crappy, run out the door, go to work, like, um, I just think we get so ingrained, and I think that it's really easy to fall into bad habits, and those become so ingrained because sometimes it's decades we've been doing them, that changing just the bad habit to a good habit, I think is very challenging for a lot of people.
So this is a huge topic. I don't even know how many different ways I could answer this. Almost infinite, I feel like, because we could talk about different individual factors or aspects of habit development and psychology and stuff like that. But one thing that I think is really important for people to understand is you just said that people have got into so-called bad habits over years or decades, etc. And I think part of the reason that most people would agree with that, I think most people know that the average American diet is not great. The average American physical activity schedule is not great. Like most of us probably already know that. I think one of the most important things that I can emphasize to people is part of that is because our overall environment is becoming more and more conducive to facilitate that. So, if, for example, let's say, pick some kind of so called bad habits, watching too much TV, as an example, that's a fairly common one. Part of the reason that your average American child watches a lot of TV is because there is more TV on today than there has ever been before. There are streaming services, there's Netflix, there's Apple, there's Amazon Prime, there's Hulu, there's Peacock, there's YouTube. There are all of these channels that make it more compelling to want to watch TV. But when I was a kid, binge watching TV wasn't quite a thing like it is today because when I grew up, we had 4 channels. We didn't have uh, as much temptation in front of us. And I think that's the same with food, for example. The amount of temptation we have today for super high calorie, super highly hyper palatable foods, all of these things that are delicious, that are grabbing our attention when we walk through a grocery store, a lot of these are kind of new. And part of the reason that the quote unquote obesity epidemic has become more and more of a thing is our overall environment, I describe as becoming more and more slippery. And when your environment becomes more and more slippery, more people slip over. And it's not necessarily a failing on the person, it's indicative of how much more treacherous your overall environment becomes. So I think part of the reason so many of us have bad habits, as you described them, is because that is kind of how our environment dictates it now. How many of us sit on our ass all day because we work at a desk, for example, or you have to drive to work, right? A lot of people are sitting in their car, driving to work, working for 8 hours, sitting in the car, driving home, getting home, feeling exhausted, and then sitting on the sofa watching TV. It's not necessarily like a choice that they've made. They're not like, I would love to spend 14 hours of my day every single day sitting down. It's just their environment and their circumstances have kind of helped dictate that. So I think a lot of our um, habits and choices are subconsciously influenced by external factors coming in rather than being conscious choices that we are always making, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I could not agree more. I would say that the world is really not set up to help you necessarily hit your health and fitness goals. I mean, you walk into the gas station
100%.
and there's just,
Yeah.
you get apple fritters right in front of your face at the checkout. And so I think it takes, because I've worked with individuals that you just talked about, and it's really hard to get their step count up. I mean, some of them are back east, and their commute alone is, 60 to 90 minutes both ways. And so it's like, I mean, each way, right? And so you add that up, and then plus they get to work and they've got to sit there. And so um, I don't, I don't I used to say early in my career, we all have the same 24 hours, and now I know that is abundantly not true. Some people have very different 24 hours than others. Now, being a father myself, my 24 hours when I have him looks different than when I don't, and so, yeah, I agree.
That was actually one of my first ever kind of nearly viral videos was I said, stop saying we will have the same 24 hours a day. And part of the reason it went viral was because some people got really mad at me and lots of people arguing in the comments. And I think because they were arguing in the comments, the like views went up and they went up. But part of the reason I made that video is not because I was trying to be a, dickhead riling people up for shits and giggles. Is because I talk to clients where I realized that the difference in our daily schedule was so painfully obvious that I felt like I would be doing them a disservice by not talking about this. So I'm sure he doesn't mind me saying it because he's a really good friend of mine, and I've actually used his story in my book as well. But I remember talking to he was like one of my best mates, and I hadn't seen him for a while. And he's like, "Oh, how often do you train?" And I was like, "I know, like I train most days, like 6 times a week." And he's, "Oh my god, you're so dedicated. Like I just really struggle for time." And if you only took that part of the conversation and you asked people who was the most dedicated person, the guy that goes to the gym 6 days a week, or the guy that hasn't been going to the gym, like he's scraping once a week, maybe twice a week, you would immediately be like, he is the dedicated guy. I'm the dedicated guy because I'm lifting or exercising 6 days a week. I'm like hardcore gym fanatic. And I remember when he said this to me, I was like, hang on, stop the bus. It didn't fit right because I knew what his daily schedule was like compared to mine. And I was like, I'm a personal trainer. I work self employed in a gym, and I will literally book clients around my schedule to make sure I hit my workout. So I used to book a client in at say 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. And then I would train at 11 or 11:30, and then I would book clients in again. So I engineered my whole day to make sure that I could exercise. And he was a father of a young child. He used to get up really early, um, help take care of his kids in the morning sometimes, or he would drive to work. And he had a really long commute to work because the traffic going into Oxford in England was a fucking ball ache. And, he's like, oh, I'll be in traffic for, 60 to 90 minutes a day, both ways. And he would get up and start working early, work a long day, often work extra hours because you have one of those bosses that expects more of you than you're contractually obliged to give. Then he would drive home again, like 60 to 90 minutes in the car. And I remember him saying to me, when I get home, I won't do anything without making sure I spent time with my family first. So he's like, I'll come home. Ideally, I make it home in time for dinner. I would help prepare the dinner if my wife's already started. I would put my children to bed, that type of stuff. And he said, I am reading my daughter a bedtime story at like 8:30 p.m. or something like that. And I'm in a dark room reading a bedtime story with her falling asleep on my chest, which after a long day when you've been up at 6 a.m., that's when you're ready to go to bed. You are unwinding. And he said, then that is when I get to go to the gym. 9 p.m. after I woke up at like 5:30 or something like that. And I remember being like, bro, you work so much fucking harder than me every single day. And you're talking about me being disciplined because I exercise for like 6 hours a week. You get up at before 6 a.m. every day and you go to the gym at 9 p.m. when you're exhausted. I was like, if that was me and I had a child and all of these obligations, I wouldn't have gone to the gym either. If I'm getting up at 5:30 a.m. and my only opportunity to go to the gym was like 9 p.m., I'm not going to the gym. I'm exhausted and I'm going to sleep. And I just thought it was so interesting that he viewed me as being disciplined when I was like, no, you are the disciplined one. The amount of effort you're putting in to provide for your family and do everything you need to do. Like, I understand why the gym was a low priority. And I had to make a video about it because I think some gym people are a little bit too trigger happy to call other people lazy without asking what they're struggling with or why they're struggling. And, my mate he was exhausted. He was exhausted. He was overworked. He was underslept. He had a million priorities that were higher than exercising for him at the
Mm.
time. And it wasn't easy for him to go to the gym based on his work schedule. Whereas for me, it was super easy. So when he said that I was the disciplined one, I was like, I can't let him leave this conversation as if he is lacking discipline because I looked at his daily schedule like he was inspirational as fuck. Him doing so much stuff. And I'm just that young self-employed personal trainer squeezing in my workouts around clients. I was like, I'm literally in a gym. I can leave my client and start lifting 5 minutes later. Like,
You don't have to battle to go to the gym. I remember that feeling. That was nice.
I'm already in gym clothing.
Yeah,
I've already got my gym clothes on. I can just go to the change room, swap my top over. I can be doing a bench set in 2 minutes.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's such a good story, and it's hard because on social media nowadays, there's a lot of I don't know why they all pop up in my feed, but a lot of, the alpha bros, like, with, "You're fat and you're lazy," and I don't think it's always that simple. I think there's a
yeah,
lot of
grinds.
I think it's a very multifaceted issue that's not just as easy to it's like people just singling out one ingredient, right? Like, "That is so bad for you," and it's like, "No, there's a lot of factors at play here that play into
Yeah.
this," and, I love that story. That is really, really good. Speaking of priorities, we gotta wrap this up. And I'd love to pick your brain more because you're so smart, but, um, your video with, your now wife, Sohi, was I mean, I cried, and I don't even know you guys personally,
Is the
when sh
wedding speech?
Yes, so good.
Thank you so much.
What has gotten married mean to you, and has it changed you at all? I mean, I'm engaged right now. I've been married before, but I'm gonna be, getting married this year. I'm just curious how that's kind of, as what has that brought to your life?
I don't mind saying this, and I said it in my wedding speech, which went surprisingly viral. So anyone who's seen that knows I've already said it. But I never anticipated getting married. I don't know why. Some people grow up thinking I can't wait to get married and have kids, and I was just never that person. Still a very romantic person, still believed in love, still experienced love, but never someone who was desperate to get married. It just didn't grab me for whatever reason. And uh, when I met my wife, my now wife, Sohi, I remember that when we talked about getting married, I remember feeling excited by it. And you know how there's that kind of running joke with some people where they always make jokes about their husband or wife, like they're a burden or their hard work, like, oh, my husband, he's a pain in the ass, or my wife, oh my God, she's such a nag, like whatever it is. I just never had that. And we talked about getting married so early in our relationship, and I remember leaving one of those conversations excited by the idea of getting married. And I was like, well, this is new. And I couldn't even put my finger on why, but the idea of marrying her meant a lot to me. And I didn't think it would happen, but getting married made me feel more smitten afterwards. And I was already pretty smitten in love and very smitten with her. But there was something about the fact we'd made that commitment to each other where I feel like it really meant a lot. And uh, being married the last 3 years now, best 3 years of my life. for sure. And there's something about knowing that the person that you're with has made a decision that they want to spend the rest of their lives with you, which is such an amazing gesture of love. Imagine like someone saying to you, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want you to be the only person that I ever wake up next to again. I think there's something so special about that. And it means a lot more to me than I ever thought it would mean.
I gotta
Zero
ask, you
regrets.
guys thinking about kids?
Uh, it's been one of those topics. It has been one of those topics on and off. I I've same with marriage. I've always been a little bit uh, not like skeptical. Skeptical is maybe the wrong word. I never thought. I never grew up thinking I'm desperate to have kids. I know some people are like even when I was a teenager, I knew I wanted a family. I was never that person. Um, but I think recently being with her and the way our lives have evolved, I think it has created a foundation where the idea of being a father isn't scary like it was before. I think it's that I think there's a certain psychology where you don't think about marriage and kids so much when you don't have your life in order. It's almost like I've got so much shit to sort out for myself. I don't feel like I'm ready for that next step. Kind of the running joke that people with commitment issues can't get tied down, that type of thing. And I feel like my life for the last few years has been so good that uh, she certainly changed my perspective on that. And I
Wow,
didn't think that would ever happen.
that's awesome. I know he won't mind me sharing this because it's already talked about it once, but I'm my good buddy Jordan Syatt, who I believe you know
Mhm.
as well.
I
Um,
talked to Jordan about this recently. We literally we were on the phone about a week ago just talking about kids. And he was like, bro, having kids is the best thing I've ever done.
4 years ago when I met him, I went out to Dallas and hung out with him, and I was like, "You think you have kids?" He's like, "I don't know, man. We're pretty happy. It's pretty like low key." And I was like, "Dude, how did I ever live without kids?" Right? And it's just like it's kind of like marriage, right? And all of a sudden, you're like, "Wow, this means way more to me than I thought." And yeah, man, that's and she's isn't she actively getting a PhD? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, she's I mean, technically on the brink of getting her PhD. So it's been a few years.
It's a lot of commitment.
She's been juggling a lot. We both had a very busy few years. So she's submitted her PhD, and now there's a wait time, and then there's the PhD defense and all of that. So I can't jinx it, but she's done 99% of the work, and now fingers crossed by June or whatever it'll be done. But yeah, I literally like it's coincident that you brought up his name because Jordan Syatt said he was like, "Oh my god, having kids is the best thing," and he was like, "You need to be a dad. You need to be a fucking dad." He was like so supportive because like you would be a great dad, and I love Jordan. He's got such a positive energy and genuinely like lovely guy, and he actually made a vow to me that I'm gonna slightly exaggerate, but only because of friend peer pressure. He said that if we had kids, he would move to California to be near us because it was like a bet. So if on the very slim chance he listens to this and we have children, I expect him to uphold his end of the
Well,
bargain.
now I'll text him and tell him he's got to uphold that.
I've put it out into the world as well, so he can't go back on his word.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember way back in the day, I mentioned something about you that I liked your content. It was like, he's way smarter than you, though. Don't try to imitate other people. Just be you. You
I think I honestly think being you is a great thing on social media. Everyone has their own unique voice, and I also don't think that I don't think that being particularly like researched or even being that intelligent on social media. I know it sounds silly. I don't think you need to be that smart on social media. And part of the reason I think that is when I do video topics about like, here's what the research says about fat loss, or here's what the research says about this type of cardio, whatever, the actual people watching it are a very, very small subset of people who are already interested in fitness and already on social media. Now, if you think of how many Americans don't exercise regularly, for example, you could have zero knowledge, never read research papers. But if you're good enough that you can motivate more people to exercise, you can have a significantly bigger impact on the health of this nation that we both live in, obviously you're a citizen of, than I could with nerdy videos. And I think sometimes there's a risk of people getting so focused on like trying to provide nerdy information, and I know I'm guilty of this, that they're actually not having as big an impact as they could. So I would be not upset. I would hate for anyone to look at the video content I put out and think, God, I'm not good enough because I can't make the same videos he makes. Because you can make a way bigger impact not even trying to emulate that.
Dude, when I just like, and that's what I almost got frustrated with. I make the more simplistic I keep it, and I give some infotainment. I make somebody laugh. I give them a little bit of information, but not overboard. I'm like, the dumber my content is, the better it does. But
If you can get people laughing, laughing is always good. Very few people don't like having fun. If you can get people laughing and you can get more people exercising from not exercising, you can like significantly impact people's health. And compare that to research where it's like, oh, is doing a leg extension when you lean back better than a leg extension leaning forward? Or like, can you bias the medial head of the tricep if you perform it? It's like, it's such fucking nerdy shit that like 0.1% of the population nurses a metaphorical semi reading that type of research paper. And I am one of those people,
yeah, I'm one of
but
those
it doesn't
people
mean
too.
that
I'm like,
everyone else wants to, wants to know. So I think there are a lot more people that would benefit from not caring about the real nitty gritty stuff. I think focus on the fundamentals, get really good on the fundamentals. And if you can help more people do that, you are making a way bigger impact than you realize, I think.
hope any coaches listening to this pick up on that. So, dude, thank you so much for your time. The new book is out. Fat Loss Habits. I mean, I think it just came out, correct me if I'm wrong, the 28th of January. Is that correct? Like a week,
Yeah,
like when we're
literally a
recording
few
this.
days ago.
Yeah, a few days ago,
Yeah.
and it's already doing really well. Congratulations on the success. Well, I don't know if there's a preferred place people want to grab it and support you, Amazon, or we can just list your Instagram. You can click on a bio or
I don't even care if someone wants to buy my book. Any format that they like is great for me. And
free.
if they want to follow me on social media, any platform is great.
And it's you want to list your Instagram handle. It is that's right. BDC Carpenter.
Yeah, I know. Even when I made it, I was like, it's not the easiest thing to read out, and part of that was when you set up your email addresses and you'll put in like Brad Jensen at, and it's like that's already gone. So
Yeah.
I put in Ben Carpenter at, that was already taken. So then I use my middle initials. My name is Benjamin David Cocaine Carpenter. True story, 100% true. Promise you, Benjamin David Cocaine Carpenter, and that is why I promise you, it's spelled differently, but I promise you that is
Okay,
my
gotcha.
name. Um, so I was like, every time Ben Carpenter had gone and B Carpenter had gone, I was like, I don't want to be B Carpenter 73829. So I just put BDC Carpenter for all my like email addresses and logins or whatever. But every time someone reads my username, they go BDC BD Carp B, BDC Carpenter.
Hey, over 500,000 people have eventually found it. But yeah, I was like, wait, did I say that correctly? I like when it said it out loud. The fact that you
Every time I have to tell someone my email address on the phone or website or something, I'm like, it's a pain in the ass. I shouldn't have done this.
and I think my middle name should have been Cocaine with how much I liked it. But 12 years sober now. But anyways, man, thank you so much. You guys grab
Congrats.
his book. We'll list everything in the show notes for his Instagram, YouTube, everything. You guys, if you're not following, man, give him a follow. And yeah, if you want to support his book, we'll list that link too. But dude, congratulations on the success. Thank you for your time and your wisdom and all you put out on social media.
And thank you to everyone who listened.
We'll talk to you guys next week. Bye-bye. Hey guys, it's Brad here. Just wanted to thank you so much for listening. We couldn't be any more grateful that you took the time out of your day to listen to us. We hope we provided value. If we did, it would mean the world to us if you would subscribe and share this with your friends.